The new commercial's on! Ah!
The future is bright at Monsters Incorporated.
I'm in this
We're
one.
part
I'm
of
in this
your
one.
life. We power your car. We warm your home. We light your city.
I'm Monsters Incorporated.
Hey, look, Betty!
Carefully matching every child to their ideal monster to produce superior screen, refined into clean, dependable energy. Every time you turn something on, Monsters Incorporated is there.
I'm Monsters Incorporated.
We know the challenge. The window of innocence is shrinking. Human kids are harder to scare.
Of course, MI is prepared for the future. With the top scarers, the best refineries, and research into new energy techniques.
Okay, here I come.
We're working for a better tomorrow. Today.
We're Monsters Incorporated.
We're MI, Monsters Incorporated. We scare because we care.
John Lilly once put it this way: there are no limits at all to the human mind whatsoever, except those we impose on ourselves because of our beliefs. And those limits are also beliefs to be transcended. And that's a view that suggests that the possibilities of human transformation are virtually infinite. And we have no way of knowing the outer horizon of what it means to be human.
And really, to understand all this, everything, you have to go very, very deep into a study of history, consciousness, neurophysiology, everything. You have to be the supreme eclectic type of leaning, and you really have to be wanting to know who you are and what everything's about.
And the thing that you'll find when you go to sacred sites, if you're very humble about it, is that you are on a personal journey, and the sacred site will respond to you in a way that is appropriate only to you. The information is always what you are searching for. And it's the intent you give that energy that defines whether it is used for right action or not. And it is inside these sacred spaces that you will be reminded that you are a god, that you are a bright star.
So what you're trying to do is move through the course without ricocheting off walls or creating karma. You're trying to slide through things smoothly. How do you do that? It's called flowing. There's a technique that you can do that will allow you to touch some part of your inner being that has more knowledge than your conscious state does.
Dad. Dad.
I'm here.
How'd you do it? How'd you first ghost?
Out for a run. Alone. Something we're never supposed to do. Ursa D. Camos. Right in front of me. I go for my cutlass. Shoots his pincer. Right through my shoulder. Next thing I know, we're over the cliff. Falling. 30 meters. Straight down. Into the river. We settle. Onto the bottom. It's on top of me. But it's not moving. And I realize he's trying to drown me. I'm thinking,
thinking I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. I cannot believe this is how I'm gonna die. I can see my blood bubbling up, mixing with the sunlight, shining through the water. And I think, wow, that's really pretty. And everything slows down. I see his pincer through my shoulder. And I decide I don't want that in there anymore. So I pull it out. And he lets me go. And more than that, I can tell it can't find me. Doesn't even know where to look. And it dawned on me. Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity, Qatar. Now, do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story. And that day mine changed.
Hi, you've reached Walt, Skylar, and Walter Jr. Please leave a message and we'll get back to you. Skylar, are you there? I don't know what to do. I need to talk to you. I'm...
Hey, Marie. It's me. What's up?
Yesterday I got home and found him. He didn't even tell me he was coming.
A man was killed.
The federale, right in front of him.
Baby, that now. It's me, Hank. Sorry.
Hey, buddy. What's up?
Do you mind if I... You think you might want to talk it through with somebody?
What, a shrink? No. I can't go down that road. Start going down that road, kiss your career goodbye.
Or Marie. Or me, if you like.
You know, I don't know how to say this. You know, the things I deal with, you and me don't have much of what you might call an experiential overlap.
What if I told you we do? I have spent my whole life scared, frightened of things that could happen, might not happen. 50 years I spent like that. Finding myself awake at 3 a.m, But you know what? Ever since my diagnosis, I sleep just fine.
Okay.
And I came to realize it's that fear that's the worst of it. That's the real enemy. So, get up. Get out in the real world. And you kick that bastard as hard as you can, right in the teeth.
Hey, you epic being. Welcome, Andre Hodge, Infinite Potential Healing, servant of truth with you once more. Thank you as always for allowing me to be a part of your journey. I hope to offer content again that will be an ally to you enduring and overcoming everything in life and launching from and taking your existence to a whole new level. So today I'm going to offer the next in my emotional mastery theme, and emotional mastery to me is one of the most fundamental and foundational components to thriving in this world, right? What I've tried to do in all the videos I've offered is impart many of my discoveries and experiences and attitudes and sort of circumstance that I was in that potentially you can overlay in yourself and then measure yourself of how you reacted and stuff like that. And there's many different areas of my experience and stuff. Going back to 30 years ago, it's crazy to say, but working in Burger King, Hungry Jack's we call it here, and working in that environment, and then going through my IT era and going from being very feeling very inadequate and all sorts of stuff, and feeling I was drowning and it being well beyond me, to just chipping away and being very methodical and making progress every day and stuff like that until I got comfortable. And then I realized I went from being inadequate to thriving and launching from and taking myself to a whole new level and stuff. I like that metaphoric crossover image, which is a metaphor of a journey of every sort of development and learning sort of curve that we all go through and stuff like that. And then going in and going to a senior systems engineer level and stuff, and doing exams and getting qualifications and all that sort of stuff, and then getting into currency trading and learning all about the energy of money and investing energy and life force into trades and all the stress and stuff that went on with that, and all the courage to go in and risk everything and stuff versus a theory sort of paper trade sort of thing, not risking anything to have skin in the game like life force energy. Because to me, money is life force encapsulation technology. We trade energy to get services and all that sort of stuff and accelerate our journey and save time and all that. So time and energy are variables that are massive factors that we each and every day experience and what is in our body and stuff, and we source rather from food, or if you've gone through the pranic healing sort of appreciation of our spleen is like a life force USB port to the life force that's all around us, that our body, despite what we've all been through, and I'm not going to get into the big scale stuff, the amplify the echoes sort of stuff and the other influences that are of a big scale and what's been going on over a vast amount of time and stuff. But ideally, sort of this emotional mastery series is an impartation from my perspective to, despite all that, we can still endure it all, let alone thrive and stuff, right? And so to me it's like all that stuff is being done to grind us down, but there's a Ram Dass sort of quote that I've employed many times: when you reduce yourself to zero, your power becomes infinite. So they've grinded us down to nothing, and it's like so much stuff is done, but yet we're here. You're here. You're willing to take on board these concepts and operate with a level of sovereignty and stuff like that, right? So this particular release, and potentially a second one, because I might go really keyboard ninja with a lot of awesome clips and stuff, and I've got some ideas of some Michael Zarin clips as well that I want to include, and they might be 5 or 10 minutes each and stuff like that. So this might go quite long. So what I might be doing is actually breaking it up into 2 parts, right? Because it's such a big concept. But what I'm going to get into, this will be Emotional Mastery Part 10, and it's fear versus love state, our amazing body tech, and life force mastery, right? So I've offered many of these components all the way through all of my content in my evolution of understanding and stuff, and sort of the experiences I had with people and doing healing and all that sort of stuff, and getting to that very simple sort of energy hygiene and sovereignty sort of concepts that I employ that might seem very simple, but it's fascinating, right? Just employing those 2 things in our world, right? And how they're not encouraged, all right? So the love versus fear state, right? There's many different sort of perceptions and concepts that maybe many people have, but to me, what I'm going to do in this is reintroduce or introduce to you an epic teacher that was one of the first I discovered and just devoured way back all those years ago, that I say 17 years ago, when I really got into all this stuff. There was really cool videos back then that people would do collages of all the different people, and I really just, like, when I really got into things, and I would just love those collages of videos where people would combine all the different teachers and stuff. So that's why I include all the clips like I do, because hearing them in their own words and seeing what they've got to say, and many different people come to the same conclusion through their own unique journeys and stuff like that. So to me, it was always massively powerful for me to actually hear these people and their energy and all that sort of stuff. And I don't actually remember when I first came across Bruce, but to me, he's one of, as say me doing this and offering all these sort of things, like him as a teacher and how he carries himself and what he shares and his veracity and vitality and stuff like that for life, and feeling the potential in people and getting out there and challenging himself. And he's always been one of the core people out there that I just appreciate. And I know a lot of people out there, and you may also be across him. And one of my videos I've offered, and I used to have him a lot in my Conscious Explorer series that I don't have up anymore, but I've got a couple videos early on that I've offered, one about this sort of stuff that's got a couple 100,000 views and stuff like that. And but yeah, he's a really amazing teacher. And back in that early era, when another thing I did also was meditation, I forgot to say, but I was doing currency trading and meditation and devouring all this stuff all at the same time. And it was I can reflect when I was there and what I was doing in my states and all the positions and my states when I was there, and I can tune into each of those instances. So we've all got these instances of when we were in different times and the level of awareness I sort of had and stuff, and just doing the best and realizing all the angles I didn't know versus now and stuff. So it was very much the pre-2012, and if you weren't there, you don't know, but it was just, there was such inertia and excitement, and there was a goal, and there was potential, and something going to happen, and all this sort of stuff. And it was a very, very potent time, and I feel very fortunate to be there. And if you're an OG like me and you were there and you know what it was like and how it's been since, and it's not been the same and stuff like that, and it all comes to the naivety and all this sort of stuff and what we didn't know. But I just remember, and the way I operate is relative to emotion, it's that we'll get into this love and fear state, right? And I might show you the emotional spiral sort of image next to me at this stage. Coming from computers as well, like what Bruce will say is there's binary, like zeros and ones sort of thing in computer in that. And then once you appreciate the emotions, then the core two emotions we have, and everything is a derivative of that. There's love and fear, right? And I think like going back to that era, like all my journey that I've sort of said, and I don't really want to get into it all now, I've shared it many times, and the reason why I just share and repeat stuff is because I assume that maybe you've been white and stuff, but a lot of people might not be thorough with all my old stuff. So I offer these concepts because it's an opportunity to reflect against yourself and see where you are, but also the whole conscious Tetris thing of how much your development has gone on since I've offered it in the last instance that I might have. So there's many reasons why I share what I do for different levels of the audience and all that sort of stuff, right? Wherever you may be on your journey. And but I know in me, like, I've always had this sort of ability to not sort of be governed by fear, right? But I didn't realize like the difference between love and fear state, right? But I sort of had an instinct of it. But so that lack of the technical understanding, I call it an passive mode, right? So you might do things instinctively, but you don't know you're doing it, so it's passive, right? But the difference of, say, when I came across this Bruce sort of stuff, it went from being passive to active. So the difference between passive is like the potency might be like this, but then the active is like very focused and very potent, and there's a difference between active and passive mode and stuff, right? So that, I remember when I came across all this stuff, it was incredibly rich and empowering for me. And this will get into stress and the environment impacts and the perception of the environment and what you're going through and all that sort of stuff. So it works on a lot of the awareness sort of levels and the body mechanics. So you can measure your body and not be a passenger to it and not be dominant of it and driving it, but just be in partnership with it. And why does it need to go through this reaction to the perception of what we see? You can control it, but not suppress it as well. There's a difference between suppression, like you imagine a balloon that's got not much air, and I always do this analogy, and the suppression is like trying to crush it, and then you might get the distortion where it pops out. It's not about suppression, it's about appreciation of why you need to go through it. And you can rewire your body and your reaction to things and stuff. And any moment you can just slow things down as well, and just like, why am I needing to experience this state in my body? Because then it affects all the perception and the navigation of things and your interpretation of things, like the fear versus love state. It's two different states, and this is going to be a very cool video for that. All right, so what I might do is just show the Bruce book. All right, quick. So a lot of what this particular lecture is going to be about, all right, which is the main body, all right, is about the biology of belief, right? And this is the first book I bought of his. I've got a few. And this lecture is actually from 2000. And if you've been into my stuff or what I've offered of late, then I've actually gone back to that era of offering some of the amazing teachers, going back to the money video I did a few releases back and stuff, of these teachers that were offering their perspective from 20 years ago, because I think it's really cool to offer that stuff, because A, it was very simplified compared to the complexity of now and stuff, right? But that's why I like the Asher stuff and all that. You know, it's easy to look back with hindsight and see how these people are wrong. But I think it's really cool to actually appreciate their wisdom of offering it back then compared to what we know now. And I think like when you actually see the main body with me offering components to add depth to them relative to the multi-D and the psychic warfare and all this, and perception management and all this sort of stuff, right? And perception pattern recognition relative to your emotional state, because it is a massive variable. And it's just always really cool, right? So this is the book. I highly recommend it. You know, should be taught in schools and all this sort of stuff, right? This is one of the first I got into, and I just devoured it probably in a day. I've got many books like this that are on my list to review and stuff like that. I'm in an interesting state where I'm processing so much at the moment. So I thought I would also bring in the love versus fear state sort of thing now, because I've got some pretty epic content that I'm contemplating of releasing, and I want to offer this reference of mastering the body tech now, so you're not a passenger to it, because there's other things like feeling inadequate and how vast everything is and stuff. But to me, if you embrace the multi-dimensional mechanics that I've got in my sovereignty declaration and what I've offered elsewhere, is that at that level we are superior, alright? So everything going on is an indicator of, from my perspective, the aspects that don't want us to be able to achieve that, alright? And everything being done to us from the DNA level and all that sort of stuff, and you know, the society stuff that I might get into with some of the Michael Tazarian clips and stuff like that, right? To me, none of that would be needed if we were inferior, right? So what is our superiority if that's the case? And let's play with it. You know, in this amazing, crazy, complex world, like, what if it's the ultimate thing to thrive in it on a multi-dimensional level, right, when no one else is, right? So that's been my approach, right? What is our superiority? And that's been where I've dedicated myself to and gone through everything I've gone to. And a lot of the experiences and stuff, you know, they may not be the best, but you don't know what will define you, all right? And then it's your perception of them and what you learn from them and what you take away and stuff, right? So I'll just move on from this. Because I talk about our peak awareness time, right? And I haven't shown this for a while. You know, navigating uncertainty and stuff like that, right? You know, there's the fear of the future, and then there's the past issues that might be limiting our potential because we've gone through trauma and all this sort of stuff. So there can be baggage and debris from the past that limits our potential in any moment. And the fear of the uncertainty going on, and the perception of the future and the uncertainty that has, you know, it might potentially limit our potency in the moment and stuff. So what it comes down to is, if you're in the fear or love state, alright, how do you think that helps your navigation, alright? Like, this is a perception of the fear future, but if you're up here, what's your potential if you're transcending all the influences and stuff and navigating in this world? To me, there's an opportunity to have a far more potent existence in any moment, mastering yourself relative to the fear and the love state, right? And then there's other things like the consequence of going into these emotional states, right? So to me, just quickly up front, like when you're in fear, just imagine your energy field is a bubble that you're in, right? To me, like, if you go through those emotions relative to the fear and the derivative of fear, if I've got that emotional sort of spiral image where love is up and fear is down and stuff like that, you can do a search for emotional mastery and emotional spiral and stuff like that to look at all the derivatives of fear and love and stuff like that. If you go back to Emotional Mastery Part 5, which is all about passion, I talk about how this concept that Cliff High offers and stuff like that, which is really amazing, how he wrote code relative to the emotional state of linguistics. That just still blows my mind, what he's achieved with that. And but to me, from a psychic defense level, if you're in a fear state and all those, then you open up a gap and influences can get in and stuff, and then you can get hacked, and then, you know, there can be chips and all sorts of stuff inserted, and this main body will get into the, you know, the adrenals and stuff like that. To me, like, you can have chips in your adrenals and stuff, and then entities can get in and harvest your energy, so you can be in a very low energy state and all that sort of stuff, right? So in spite of all that, to me, like, if you place the level of responsibility onto your emotional state, you know, and demand a lot from yourself, not be masochistic and all that sort of stuff, just appreciate and just track back why you had to go down those emotional states, then it gets into your life force management and budgeting and stuff like that. To me, like, one of the areas I went through was going through really limited financial resources, and the situation was that I could budget 1.5 meals a day, and I had to walk potentially 10 or 15 kilometers a day. And what I found is, like, the Aboriginals with walking is very, you can get to this state with walking where it actually doesn't cost you anything, let alone just moving around. It actually can reanimate and recharge you and stuff like that. So there's these concepts like the piezoelectric, and you can get those watches that power up themselves from your life force and all that sort of stuff. And then all those sort of concepts get into what's going on in our world at the moment relative to the Internet of Bodies, and why people have sort of low energy and all these sort of unknown illnesses and stuff, which are probably related to all that technology, if you get my drift. So, and then there's a theme relative to life force, and there's one video I want to do about our body's genius at managing life force resources, you know, infinite potential healing release. You know, people can get running on fumes like less than 10% or 5%, or they might be getting to about 30%. And to me, like, to have our basic sort of functionality going and stuff, and this gets into what I'm going to offer with Bruce, it's like you need to have an idle of, say, 50%. And then if you want the awesome intuitive talents and stuff and psychic defense, maybe you need 60 or 70% to be running. So just think of how most people are running on fumes. And then it gets to the number of data variables that you can process at any one time. Like, if you have a very run down sort of body tech, then you can't process a lot. And then it flows into your awareness and just dealing with people and stuff. And then it comes to traumas and stuff. A lot of people, they actually want to be depleted because they don't want to face their stuff, and being very reduced on a life force level, it helps them avoid it. But you might be really high energy, and just being in your field, it actually cranks everyone up, and it brings their crap that they don't want to face into their awareness, and you're the problem because you're bringing that in, and then it's projection and all that sort of stuff. So these are sort of the mechanics that go on in our world, and a lot of them we can blame the structures in place, which they have their share of responsibility to that. But it's also, when you understand people, and not from an idealist view but a reality, how it actually is, then it's just fascinating. So to me, out of all this, appreciating all the variables, then it comes back to, how do I navigate? What's the best experience for me? What's the mastering the moment, and appreciating emotional mastery and stuff like that is core to that, because then you get data come at you, you appreciate all the variables going on, and ideally you keep level. So to me, going through that very limited fun sort of era with that extreme scenario, I just got to the point, on top of the meditation as well. Like, when I went to meditation, it was just like, to me, there's no logic of not being in a meditative state, so I just live in it. And then in that budgeting my life force, I just realized there's, like, every emotion you go through, you have to invest in it, and then to And if it's a negative emotion, then you have to budget the energy to bring it back. So there's double costs. So the logic of like, why would I want to go through something that I have to undo that's only going to cost me? So then you can rewire yourself, and it's just like, what's the purpose of going through this? There's none. And we can just be in it and appreciate what's coming to us and not be driven by the reaction of our body to it and all those sort of things, right? So then you can budget your emotions and your life force to have the best experience that go back and nourish your body and stuff like that. Because when you do that, it all comes back to the vitality that your body has to exist at the highest level and the most maintenance and stuff. And what this will get into is the love state, right? And how all the nourishment goes into your organs and stuff rather than the fight and flight mode. And how that doesn't go to your brain areas that allow you to have higher cognitive function and stuff. So he gets into like exams and stuff like that. But what I might do, I am not sure if I'm going to offer some Michael Desarian clips and stuff like that, and a whole heap of other clips all about fear and stuff like that. I may break this up into 2 parts because it might go quite long. And I don't want it to be too, maybe many of you will devour it and stuff like that, but it's also a good one to offer segments and stuff because I want to just add little components at sections in it. I've sort of had to watch this a few times, the main body of the Bruce Lipton video, and appreciate it. It was good for me to go back to as well and stuff, but I can add a lot more depth in several components, how they affect us, say in the multidimensional psychic defense and all that sort of stuff, and pattern recognition and all that sort of stuff, but also the effect on the body and the life force and all this sort of stuff. Alright, but so I may have shown some Michael Desarian clips at the start. There's one about fear that I want to add that has Machiavelli sort of stuff about how society works and all this sort of stuff, right? And the clips that I'm sort of wanting to offer from him are from 2010, right? So he was epic. It's from a lecture that was 11 hours. I used to devour it. I've watched it so many times, but I love going back to it because just him as a teacher, his presentation and his intensity and just being like an MJ, like lit all the time and stuff, and the volume of books that he read and all the philosophers and all the quotes he has and segments and stuff, it's exceptional high quality sort of work in this field and stuff. So I love sharing him as well as, like I said at the start, about teachers and that. So I may have shared some stuff with him at the start, and if I break this up into 2 clips, I've got a couple of clips I'm thinking of his. But what I might do to lead it, instead of a fear thing, I might actually offer a really cool clip from this guy called Anthony DeMello. And it's about love is a state of being, right? And I used to have this on my channel, but people behind him asked me to take it down and stuff like that. And he's not easy to find anymore. I've got a fair bit of his stuff, but he was an amazing teacher. But this clip, it gets into the difference of love. Like a lot of people think love is being in love with someone, it's an infatuation, when in actual fact, love is a state of being, right? And it's a state that you hold, right? So what I might do here is just offer that clip, right? And then I'll get into the Bruce Lipton stuff after. I'll lead it with a positive thing. I was thinking being a mega fear sort of society sort of stuff, right? As I like to do, but I think I'll offer this up front because it will be very potent for you here to have a reference from another teacher with the same sort of ideas, right? So I'll leave that with you and I'll see you on the other side, alright? It's only a couple minutes.
Love is like listening to a symphony. Life is a symphony, and to love means to be sensitive to the whole of that symphony. It means to have a sensitive heart to everyone and to everything. Can you imagine someone who's listening to a symphony and only hears the drums? or give so much value to the drums that the other instruments are almost drowned out? A good musician who loves music will listen to every one of those instruments. He may have his favorite instrument. He may have his preferences, but he listens to them all. When you fall in love, when you have an infatuation, an attachment, an addiction, an obsession with a human being, you know what you're doing? That person stands out and the others are drowned out. Your heart is no longer sensitive. Love is not a relationship. Love is a state of being. Love exists before there's any human being around. Before you come around, love already exists. Namely, the sensitive heart exists always. You don't draw that heart. That heart is sensitive to you and responds accurately to you. But then to drown out the drums, that's just as bad because you're hardening your heart again. This is what love is, to listen to the whole of the symphony, to be sensitive to it all. I told you, when the eye is unobstructed, the result is sight. You cannot do anything to get love. If you would understand your desires, attachments, attractions, obsessions, addictions, and they would drop, love would emerge. When the eye is unobstructed, the result is sight. When the heart is unobstructed, the result is love. In my country, the poets and the mystics put it so beautifully. They say, is it possible for a rose to say, I will give my fragrance to good people and withhold it from bad people? The rose by its very nature cannot but love all. Is it possible for a lamp lit in the night to say, I will give my light to the good people in this room and withhold it from the bad? Is it possible for a tree to say, I will give my shade to the good people who sit under me, but withhold it from the bad? It cannot. And the poet Kabir will say, the tree will give its shade even to the man who is striking it down, and if it is a sweet-smelling tree, it will leave its scent on the axe. What merit is it to you of yours if you only greet those who greet you? And if you only love those who love you? You must be all loving, as your heavenly Father is all loving, for he makes his sun to shine on good and bad alike, and on saints and sinners alike.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that. It was only a short clip and it was a very potent one. I used to have it on my channel, as I said, and I put it into my Conscious Explorer series and stuff, so maybe you've never seen that, or maybe you have seen it and you forgot about it, but it's very cool, alright? So if it's a bit rough, I can't help it, it's only a couple minutes and that. But yeah, the state of love, alright? And it's about getting into your state here in your body, and it's not about what goes on external to it, right? So there's a difference between the infatuation of loving someone and feeling drawn to someone in that way versus operating in a state that's your optimum in your body, right? And so this video is the relationship between the emotions and your body tech and mastering the partnership of both, right? And this Bruce Lipton stuff that I'm going to get into, it's extremely potent on helping you see all that relationship, because maybe you're a master of this and that's cool, right? Maybe this is just a reminder, maybe you know it instinctively, and as I talked about the active and the passive state, maybe you've been passive on it, but maybe what I'm all offering here in my whole emotional mastery theme, it's going to be an ally for you to see how much more potential you have in actually appreciating all this and why you need to experience stuff. And I've used my metaphor of my experiences up front and stuff like that, and I've got a lot of clips about mind mastery and all this sort of stuff on my Facebook during the week after this one about high-level tennis players and the difference between the top 5 and the top 25, and it's the attitudes that the top 5 have of putting yourself back together after a negative event and stuff like that. But what I'm really wanting to do is ideally get into this Bruce Lipton sort of video, and all up, if I was to release it in one go, it would be about 35 minutes or so. And there's other stuff in his lecture that's 2.5 hours of this one that I want to offer at other times and stuff. But there's going to be several main components, right? One is going to be about the growth versus protection, like what happens to us on the cellular level, and then in our community, in our body and stuff like that. The other is about the fear and the love state, and the relationship between how our body reacts and what it goes through, and the systems in the body, and then the life force variable of budgeting and all that sort of stuff, right? Then there's going to be a section on stress, right? How stress affects the body, right? And many things relative to that, right? And then there's going to be a section on the environment, right? And that's the stimulations and the variables of the environment that trigger our reaction to certain things, and then say stress and all that sort of stuff, right? And then he also gets into our body's ability and the technicals of our body to adapt to scenarios and stuff like that. So it's really rich, and it goes from the biology, from the cellular level, but it's also stuff that we can apply to our body, to our existence on so many ways, right? So what I want to do is get into offering that, right? And what I'm going to do is offer sections where I'll come in and I'll just add more depth, and you know, from the understandings and appreciation that I have relative to the multi-D and all that sort of stuff. But if you've never come across Bruce, I hope this is going to be a real treat for you. And those of you that have, I hope it's going to be a real rich appreciation of this epic teacher that's out there and stuff. And I really hope this content helps you master the partnership between your attitude, your emotional state, and your body tech, and helps take you to a whole nother level, right? The fear versus love state is such a potent, profound, foundational structural thing that we all can be better of, because I think, like, we've all probably had experiences in the last several years where, you know, maybe we didn't do the best in situations. So this is just to help a refresh on that, and offer a chance to reflect, and then the potency of the mastery of the moment, then going forward, then you'll be on your game like never before, right? So I'm going to leave you here, and I'll see you during it, and I may sort of cut it off a bit way through because this might be a bit long, and I might break it up into 2. We'll see how we go, right? Because I want to offer some other clips and all that sort of stuff to add more depth to this fear versus love state foundational component here, all right? So I'm going to leave it here, and I hope you get a lot from it, and I'll see you during it, all right? Thanks for being here. Enjoy.
Now, the signals that come in, let's just stop. Let's end at this moment on that other section. What does it say? It says that signals control the biology, that conventional medicine only, as it said in the science article, recognizes molecules as the source of the signals, but quantum physics, which is the parent science, and all science have to adopt to the quantum physics, so biology has to adopt the physics and recognize what quantum physics says is that energy activates these receptors as well. But I don't have to convince you of that. I already have all the literature in the papers right now that energy does the same as molecules. So energy healing is not some kind of made-up thing or some kind of, being some quackery. Energy healing is real because energy is more effective in controlling biology than molecules are. And that's according to physics. So the bottom line is we have ignored the role of energy because conventional medicine is locked back in a pre-1925 version of physics. But in 1925, when quantum physics came in, it says you must include the energy in the equation. Now the question is this. I have a cell, and I know the behavior of the cell is elicited by the receptors that read the signals. Here's this beautiful understanding, because this is what simplifies my understanding about how it all works, and then I applied it to my life, and it made such beautiful changes in my life. And it works like this. I used to clone human cells. And when I put them in the culture dishes, I'd observe their behavior and do things. And one of the things that's very interesting, if I put a cell in the culture dish when I started, and the cell is here, and I put food over here, when I start the experiment, I put the food over there and cells over here. When I come back a little later, where do you think the cell is? The cell moves toward the food, right? Okay. Experiment number 2. I put the cell over here at the start of the experiment, and I put toxin in over here. And I come back in a few minutes later, where's the cell going to be? Over here. Look, this is so beautiful, because here's the truth. At the level of the cells of which we are based, there's only 3 behaviors a cell can do, obvious behaviors that you can see. And here are the 3 behaviors. The cell can move toward a signal, the cell can move away from a signal, and the third one is actually a signal can be made in the environment, but the cell ignores it because it's not relevant. So there's actually 3 different movements: moving forwards, moving backwards, or not moving at all. Does that make sense? I mean, you can see it, right? So here's the issue. Then the behavior of the cell is actually divided into 2 kinds of behavior. When a signal is presented that the cell needs for its maintenance and its growth, the cell will always move toward the signal. When the cell is presented with a signal that threatens its life, then the cell will move away from the signal. So there's only 2 behaviors. What are they? Moving forward is growth, and moving backwards is protection. So the bottom line is this. Point. Now look at the logic, because this is the part that's like profound but simple. A cell moves forward for growth, moves backwards for protection. Can a cell move forwards and backwards at the same time? Yes or no? No. Point. Fundamental, profound nature of the point. The cells in your body are digital. When they receive signals that say growth, they will move toward things in growth. But if they're not receiving growth, then they will move backwards in protection. And the point about it is this. Then the cells in your body are going back and forth between growth and protection based on what? The perception of the environment. But since the cells are in the community, they're also the perception of the brain. So as you're thinking, what are you doing to the cells? You're giving them information about their environment. If you think that, oh my God, I can't make it through this lecture because the damn projector broke. Oh my God, what do you think my cells are going? Oh Bruce, they're hiding out. On the other hand, it's like, cool, we can make anything, we can do anything, we can survive. And what are the cells going to do? Well, they're not going to shirk backwards, they're going to move forwards in growth. Why is this relevant? Because the behavior is that clearly digitized, that it's one or the other. And the point is this, although you have 100,000 different gene programs minimum, I can take all the gene programs in your body and divide them into 2 groups. Those genes that provide for growth and reproduction, and let me explain what I mean by growth. Growth is not just from a baby to an adult. You are growing every day. Why? Because every day you're losing thousands, millions, trillions of cells a day. And if you don't replace those cells, what's going to happen to your body? You're going to experience disease and death. And so the bottom line is this. Then for you to survive on a day-to-day basis, just to keep level, you're growing all the time. And that's a requirement of the system. So the fact is this. Growth goes on, and it keeps you healthy and alive. And then the issue is this. Once you reach a certain age, then the genes, there are also genes for growth, but growth of the next generation. So the growth genes are for you or for the next generation. So those are growth genes, okay? On the other hand, growth, as I said, is only when the cells are moving forwards. But when cells are moving backwards, they exercise protection programs. So there's another set of genes in your body, or your cells, which are involved with your protection. But the point about it is this. A cell at any one time is either in growth or it's in protection, but it can't be in both. Now I got to ask you a simple question, and it's economics. Does it take energy to grow? Does it take energy to protect yourself? Well, then the point about it becomes very simple, because here's the point. When you find that you're in protection, you have to use energy. But the more protection you're in, the more energy you use. Well, where are you getting the energy from? You have a balance. You have like a checking account in your body of energy to run this body. And the more checks you write for protection, what happens to the balance? It gets less and less. And there's a point where so much protection is used that you actually now short growth processes. And this is true for like the nation right now. Right now, our budget has in excess of 50% of the U.S. budget is in protection. What does that mean? Well, all that money that's allocated for protection is not helping us grow or maintain the country in any way, because that's all put into armaments and whatever they are. And the issue is this applies to your own body. When you walk out on the street, when you wake up in the morning and you start to live, you're vacillating between growth and protection. And the issue about it is the more protection you require or you perceive you require, and that's the trick, the one that says you think you need protection, the more you put into that, the less growth you start to accommodate. And here's an interesting part. You could be so afraid, you can be scared to death. And that's the truth. The truth is this, that fear can be so great that you absolutely shut off growth so quickly that you actually die right at that moment. And the reality is, understand the balance of your health is related to the amount of energy expenditure you're putting into protection. So the bottom line, survival is actually equal to growth divided by protection. And now look at this. Turn on the news, read the newspaper, listen to the TV. What do you hear every day? More reasons to protect yourself. Well, the air's not good, the water's not good, the food's not good, these people are unsafe. Every time you turn around, what are you doing? You're walling yourself off more and more. Why? Because growth means to go forwards. What is protection? Go backwards or wall off the outside. We start to isolate when we start to become fear-bound. And as we become fear-bound, we shut down growth as a natural biological mechanism. But it's interesting.
Hey, welcome back. I hope you've gotten a lot from this so far. I don't know how long into it I am and stuff, but he's talking about growth and protection, right? And the choices, okay? And what he's actually offering is, we might think that there's left and right, up and down and stuff, right? But there's actually three, and there's the inaction variable. And if you've been around me for a long time, one of my multi-dimensional method to the 3D Madness series, I offered this video called The Trinity of Choices. Trinity is a cool character in Matrix and stuff, and I just thought it was a cool word, and I just gave myself a challenge of actually trying to create a theme based with that word in it, right? But the Trinity is ideally three, right? Like a triangle and stuff like that. So what I did in that video was basically talk about doing good, doing bad, and doing nothing, right? And most people think that they have two choices in life, right? What there are is actually three, and inaction is a choice, okay? So the choice to do nothing is still a choice, okay? Say, for instance, I use the metaphor of crossing a road, all right? If you're crossing a freeway, there's either going forward or going backwards, right? But you might be standing on the edge of the road, and there might be big trucks going past and stuff like that, and they're going very quick. And if you decide to act, then you might get hit, right? So choosing to not act and wait for a gap is logical, right? It's an act, all right? And like touching a hot stove, you burn yourself. So waiting for the stove to cool down, you don't touch it when it's hot, sort of thing. So getting into money and life force and energy budgeting and stuff, right? When I was trading, there was always three choices, right? There was go in, make a trade, or sell, right? But then there's also 90% of the time is waiting for the best time to trade, and you're waiting for setups and stuff. So inaction is a valid variable, and inaction is something that when you appreciate from that level, you realize you might be presenting people with information and data or options and stuff like that. You have to appreciate that what people do is they don't act as well. So they're choosing inaction, right? So inaction may have consequences. Like say if there's a leak in a boat, right? If you don't act, the boat floods and sinks and stuff like that. So potentially like people, if they've got issues and stuff and they don't heal on that, then there's consequence. And things escalate and stuff. I don't know. I might be getting some rain and stuff. So I just wanted to interject with that variable relative to the cellular reaction to fear and uncertainty and all that sort of stuff, right? Emotional mastery relative to action and protection, right? And relative to growth and protection, right? So I'm just going to leave that here and let Bruce go, but I just wanted to interject that part because it's very valid for you to recognize your own inaction, but inaction in others, because it's a valid state to be in for many reasons. But it also might have consequences as well, because there are times we need to act and people are choosing not to, especially related to sort of money and conserving capital, because people that like money, they might want to hold on to it and all this sort of stuff, right? And it's valid, right? Money is power. Money is life force, encapsulation technology. That's why they say money is power, and that's why they say, so all those things here, all right, relative to the life force in your body and all those things in society, okay? So I'm going to leave you here with some awesome content from the epic Bruce Lipton, all right? And I'll see you through the video at different sections, okay? Enjoy.
But it's interesting. I have 50 trillion cells. Each cell can be in growth or protection. But my whole body doesn't have to be in growth and protection, so I can have a range. My body can be in, so many cells are in growth, so many in protection, so I can have a percent. So when I look at the human system, I also recognize that growth and protection is a variable, okay? And here's the interesting part about it. When I'm growing, which biological systems in my body am I using for growth? And the answer is all the organs in here called the viscera, the heart, the lungs, the digestive system, the liver and pancreas, and all these things. These are for growth. When I protect myself, which system do I use? Get out of here, I'll hit you with my lung. No, that's probably not what it is. Okay? The point is, when you're in protection, what physiological systems do you use for protection? Muscles and bones. And the interesting thing is there's a switch in your body that switches from either the viscera or to the muscles and bones. Remember that thing we call fight or flight? Remember that adrenal system? The adrenal system is a master switch that switches between what? The two systems. The switch says, if I start to get into fight or flight, what am I going to use? Muscles and bones. Well, I shut down my viscera in the process. And that way, I have all my energy allocated to get ready to run. If I need to run away from a lion, I'm not going to start processing digestion at lunch. Why? Well, that energy might be the exact energy that it took me to get the last step so my foot doesn't get caught in a lion's mouth. So the system is intelligent. It says, when you're under threat, it will allocate the energy to where the threats are. It shuts off the visceral system. So the bottom line is simply this. In growth, the visceral system commands the somatic system. It works like this. In growth, I need water. So my body says I need water. Well, how do I get to the water? Oh, well, I move to the water. So how do I do that? Through my skeletal system. Well, who directs it? The viscera says I need water, so the skeletal system responds to the viscera's request. So the viscera administers to the need. The skeletal system administers to the viscera's need. Well, here's the interesting thing. My viscera says, Bruce, you need some water. So I say, okay, let's go get some water. So I start to go get some water, and right away, there's that lion right in front of me. And the fact is this, at the moment I see the lion, well, what do you think I'm going to do? Still go get the water? Nah. Really, at that point, my somatic system says, the hell with the water, we're running. So what's going to happen is I suppress the viscera when I activate the somatic system. And the point is, they're bound to each other. It's called the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic for the words. But the fact is what? One pushes the blood into the skeletal system, and the other pushes the blood into the visceral system because the blood is nourishing it. So the bottom line is that humans are different than the individual cells because we have this graded effect. And here's the beautiful part about it. And you know this. Love is the maximum nourishment for growth. When you're in love, you will run to that place wherever it is. You have to go over the mountain or through the mountain. You will be attracted to it so much. Why? Because love provides a whole system, all the hormones and connections of the system to do what? provide for your growth and your maintenance and your health. However, the moment you get in fear, then what do you have to do? You back away, you wall yourself off, you separate from the environment, and the consequence is this. Protection from the environment cuts you off from the environment. Cutting yourself off from the environment cuts you off from life. Now, the issue is very interestingly revealed, especially in kids in Eastern Europe where they have so many orphanages. I always thought that these kids in Eastern Europe were in the orphanages because all the wars going on over there. It turns out that's not true. The kids are in the orphanages because the parents are still having babies because of whatever their religious beliefs are, and they can't maintain them. So orphanages are dumping sites for kids that parents can't maintain, not because they don't have parents. And it turns out in the studies on these kids, virtually the largest percentage, over 80% of them, become autistic. What is an autistic child? A child that doesn't respond to the outside. Why? Because in the protection required to survive, the child walls itself off. And as a result, look at the pathology that results. These kids do not interact with our lives because they put a barrier between them and the outside world. But what else happens to them? Every growth parameter is reduced by from 30 to 40% or more. Their size, their height, their physiology. Why? Not getting love is losing the nourishment. Not getting the love means that if you're not getting love and support, then you're also then trying to protect yourself. In the absence of love is fear. And the result is fear will shut off your system. And I'll explain exactly how that happens in the human. There's a master switch.
Hey, welcome back. Thanks for being here still. I don't know how long this is, but this has been a pretty rich section, I feel. So this particular section that I'm interjecting in is about the love and the fear, and also the body tech, alright? And it gets into the life force and the nourishment and stuff, right? So you probably already know this, or you feel it, and as I said at the start about the passive versus active state, alright? You can see what Bruce says about the being in the love or the fear state of what happens to the body and the mechanics of the body, like the adrenals and the fight or flight, the sympathetic, the visceral, the parasympathetic. And long story short, if you're in fear and fight or flight, your blood races to your legs and arms and stuff. And if you're in the love state, then the blood is all in your sternum, your chest, right? And then all the nutrition is going to your organs, right? Rather than your body and your extremities like your legs and arms, right? To get away from things or fight, right? So the key takeaway is that when you're in the love state, right, you're being nourished, and it's very healing and nourishing and stuff, okay? So if you appreciate that, okay, then it's actually a benefit to your body. If you're in the fear state, there's a cost, and then all the nourishment goes. So if you get into sort of anger and rage and extreme fear and terror and all those sort of things, okay, then they can have a cost to your body, right? So to me it was like, what's the logic of going through them? It's not that I go through fear and all that sort of stuff. There are instances of that. But it's like, oh, that's interesting. Why did I allow that to happen? Or what was the scenario that I didn't see and stuff, okay? So then he's talking about stress and the effect on the body and the body's default reaction to that and what goes on, all right? And I'm just going to show you the image relative to the body and the layers and the influences and stuff, right? So at the start I tried to describe what happens to your field potentially when you go into, say, the fear state and those derivatives of those emotional states and stuff, and how potentially like scenarios around you might be trying to trigger you to go into those states and then hack in and then put stuff into your body, right? So just imagine he's talking about the visceral and the automatic responses related to the adrenals and stuff like that. And to me, what sort of happens with a lot of people is they can get so depleted. The body is like in a fight or flight mode on an energetic level, and so it's a very defensive mode because it's in jet fumes, like it has no energy in the tank sort of thing. And so what can happen is the adrenals can be triggered and armed up to be in a constant vigil state to defend you because you don't have any energy in your body. And a lot of people out there, they're in that. They don't even know, right? And they aren't able to disarm because chips and all that sort of stuff are also in them to actually keep them in that catch-22 sort of stuff, right? So these are the sort of things that you can get into complacency about, and then consequence spirals and all that sort of stuff that I say, because there's a lot out there that isn't organic to our benefit, right? It's actually, it wants us in those states to be disarmed and all that sort of stuff relative to stuff I'm going to offer in this next section relative to cognitive sort of stuff, right? So just appreciate all this, like the wisdom of our body mechanics is so understood, right? And we know basically nothing about it, right? Relative to life force and all these sort of things, okay? And just see the potential of what we all have if we just expand our awareness a little bit and then appreciate all these variables, right? So I just wanted to offer that here, right? And have a bit of a reference on the bigger multi-D stuff, but not get too heavy, right? Just to appreciate the effect of an emotional state can have on our psychic defense and all that sort of stuff. And then, you know, nothing is really, to me, it's idealist, right? Like Bruce comes from a basic body mechanics sort of level, and I get into the whole multi-D stuff that's going on, which isn't very pleasant. But from my perspective, if you understand the basic mechanics of all these things, we can still be superior to everything if we just, you know, employ that wisdom and train our bodies, like become a master in partnership with it, all right? And just really be disciplined on observing yourself and why you go into states and stuff. A lot of the stuff that we might experience isn't actually our own, but in the end of the day, we're responsible for it in our bodies and giving it the nourishment it needs to have a spirit, like a superior existence, let alone the multi-D sort of stuff, right? So I'm just going to leave that here and go back to the video, all right? So I hope you get a lot from this. Thanks for being here, and enjoy this next section, all right?
I'll explain exactly how that happens in the human. There's a master switch. Every one of us is affected by it. The system in medicine is called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. It affects every one of us, and it works like this. Stress is something that's perceived by the brain. Remember, perception. If I think of a signal as this is a scary signal, then it's stressful to me. Well, the issue is this. If I'm in growth, I go out and move forwards toward it. But when I start to see stress, I have to protect myself. So the body gets, from the signal of the brain says, okay, mobilize the body for what? Growth or protection under stress? Protection. Well, how do you do that? And here's the answer. That the signal goes from the brain to the pituitary gland. Remember pituitary gland? Even you got that in high school. What is the common name of the pituitary gland? The master gland. What does it mean? It's the gland whose function shapes the rest of this. So the brain says to the master gland, growth or protection. When the stress level is up, the master gland is given the signal to set up the body into protection. So what happens is the pituitary gland releases ACTH, which is a hormone that goes to the adrenal glands, which are on top of the kidneys. The adrenal glands secrete what? The adrenergic hormones, adrenaline. What's adrenaline for? Fight or flight. Now here's the interesting point. When the master gland says stress, what am I going to be in, growth or protection? Okay, now here's what happens. The hormones of the adrenal gland squeeze or constrict the blood vessels in the viscera. And what they do is they force the blood from the viscera to go to the arms and the legs. Why would it do that? Think about why. Because you got to run. So you got to nourish the muscles. Well, the thing is, it preferentially puts blood into the arms and legs. Well, the question is, if it preferentially put the blood into the arms and the legs, where was the blood before it was in the arms and legs? In the viscera. What's the function of the blood in the viscera? What functions? Growth. So when I get scared, what's the first thing that happens? I take the blood from here and push it out to here. Why? Because I got to run and move and fight or flight or whatever it is I'm going to do. Well, the point is this. As soon as I got stressed, I shut down my growth mechanisms. The more stress you're under, the more chronically you suppress the growth mechanism. It's not a conscious decision. It's a part of the system called the HPA, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. The significance of it is that the releasing of the glucocorticoids and adrenaline cause a fight or flight response. Well, here's an interesting point. Okay, did you get this right away? That under stress, the chemistry of the body causes the blood to go from the gut region into the arms. Does that make sense? Okay, and it makes sense then, if I don't have the blood in the gut, then the function of the gut is reduced. And that's what happens. But here's the other thing. Now think about this one, because this is like another adding an insult to an injury issue. And it goes like this. My immune system is a very expensive organ system to run. It costs a lot of body energy to run. It's a very high energy usage. If I am trying to protect myself from something that threatens me on the outside, do I use my immune system for that job, yes or no? What's the immune system function? Protection on the inside, so if bacteria or viruses get in me, okay? So here's the point. I start to see the lion. I get the release of the adrenaline and the glucocorticoids. The blood is running into my arms and legs so I could run away from the lion. What do you think happens to my immune system? Do I increase its function or decrease its function? Decrease it. And in fact, the same hormones, this is the point, the same hormones in stress are used by the medical profession to shut off the immune system in people who receive transplants of organs and tissues. Why? Because I don't want to reject them. So how do I regulate the immune system? Well, I give them these hormones. But what hormones are these? These are the hormones from stress. So it says, okay, you're not receiving a graft of an organ or a tissue, but you're under stress. What happens to your immune system? It shuts down. And the reason why it does that is conservation of energy, because I'm dealing with the external environment as the source of the threat. Well, you know this as well as I know this. When you get stressed, whether it's at school or at work, when the stress levels get real high, that's when you get sick. Why? Because when the stress levels got real high, that's when you also shut off your immune system. Important point about it is this. Then people say, well, I caught a cold, or I caught something. It's not new, it's been a long-standing understanding in medicine already, is this. Everyone in this audience is already infected with almost all the common pathogens in humans right now. They're in your blood. I can take a sample of your blood right now, and I'll show you the bacteria and viruses that live in your blood. And you say, but Bruce, I'm not unhealthy. I'm pretty damn healthy. Look at me. So what are you talking about? I'm infected. And see what the name of the organisms are given as a group. They're called opportunistic organisms. What does it mean? It means that they live in your body, but they can't thrive. They can't thrive when you're in health. When you're in health, your physiology is like in a perfect balance. It doesn't support these organisms. But the moment you get stressed, you start to shut down the immune system, and you change the physiology of your body, then these organisms take the advantage. That's why they're called opportunistic. That they were there all the time, but they can only express themselves when you're in a weakened state. When do you get in a weakened state? When you're under stress. So all of a sudden you start to get sick. You didn't necessarily catch it. You already got it. So the issue is this. What do you need to do to stay healthy? Regulate the stress. And what I will really emphasize over and over again, that remember I said approximately 5% of the people are affected or impaired lifestyle because of genetics. So their genetic defects, birth defects, affect 5%. 95% of the people don't have defects in their genes and should live a normal life. When they start to get sick, then we can't go to the genes and start blaming the genes. We have to recognize that it was the environmental signals that we were adjusting ourselves to, because when we're under stress, we automatically shut off growth. Now, you thought that was bad enough. You know, we shut down the viscera so we can run and so we're not getting growth. And we shut down the immune system because at that point it's not helping us with an external threat. Let me add the last kicker to it. And here's the kicker that's real important. Think about it. In a fight or flight situation, do you think you would use neurological reasoning and conscious, like this, that? Or do you use reflex behavior? Which one? Reflex behavior. You know what? Reflex behavior is the hindbrain, and thinking and logic and reasoning are the forebrain. So here's what happens, and most of you have experienced it. It's called exam stress. And here's how it works. The moment the adrenaline levels and the glucocorticoid levels rise to get you into a fight or flight posture, remember I told you the blood vessels in the viscera are squeezed shut and forces the blood out to the periphery? The blood vessels in the forebrain get squeezed shut and only feed the blood to the hindbrain. When you're under stress, you lose intelligence. It's required because it's not a time to be thinking, it's a time to be responding. So the issue is, and if you've been in an exam stress, you know what that means. It's like you study like 3 days in a row, you got, oh, man, I'm going to get an A. I sit down, open up the exam book, look at the first question. I don't know the first question. You know what happens? You could feel your body begin to change right there. Adrenaline's running all over. You're starting to sit in the seat. You're starting to shake. Your muscles are ready to run. Why? To protect your life now. And then you're trying to think of the answer. And guess what? You cannot think of the answer to that question. You probably cannot think of the answer to the next question or the next question until you do what? Until you calm back down again. The reason is this. It's a protection mechanism that thinking is not helpful under a stressful situation. It will interfere with the response. So the bottom line is this.
Hey, thanks for being here. I hope you've gotten a lot from this so far. Bruce is excellent. Hey. So, if I've interjected here, then it's related to the stress variable, right? And so he offers an outstanding sort of appreciation of our body mechanics relative to the environment, stimulus, and existence that might trigger us into a stress state, okay? And what I wanted to do is offer, I'm pretty sure it offers related to the cognitive function as well, and the exam metaphor and all this sort of stuff. But just think about the psychic warfare and all that sort of stuff, but also pattern recognition and things like that. So the purpose in offering this is to offer a reference of just an appreciation of the body effect, and if we're in a passenger mode rather than a active mode and reacting to scenarios, then what can happen? So I'm just going to offer a pattern recognition data sort of image that I've shared many times, all right? So just think about in that fear and the derivatives of fear and the stress sort of state and all the variables that he talks about, right? And what happens to our cognitive functions, okay? So the top image is all the data that might be in existence, right? And that metaphor that I've had many times is relative to if we're in a fear state, right? And you appreciate this, what I've offered now, then our cognitive abilities drop off. So just think about your discernment sort of things, all right? What happens? Then there might be things that you discern that aren't valid, all right? But you let them in sort of thing, or you don't have the ability to perceive at the level you have the potential to see, all right? So just appreciate these three different levels, right? Just imagine the top is in a fear state. The second is in adapting to a highly uncertain state and lacking the life force, so we've got to limit the volume of data that we can process. And the third is in an abundant love state with all our nourishment and appreciating the whole vista before us, right? So when you're in an uncertain, fear, stressed out state, right, what happens to your discernment, right? How much can you discern at any one time, right? So you may go to a state where you just don't know, right? So you take on everything, right? So you might take on variables that corrupt your perception and trust variables, you know, like maybe just appreciate how we are in nature and humanity and all this sort of stuff. There's variables in society that are set up to be an outlet for uncertainty, say religions or spiritual concepts and all this sort of stuff, or people and things that we think we can trust when they might have variables, they might not have hygiene, or the structural society sort of variables that, you know, they offer data that corrupts us and all this sort of stuff. I don't want to get too deep into it, but just appreciate there's all this data out there. And if you're in an uncertain state, what happens to your discernment? You don't know, right? And then, you know, in an abusive state, it's like the variables that you trust, you've been shattered, right? So you don't know who to trust. You lose boundaries and stuff like that, right? In a highly traumatized state, all right? That's what happens to victims of abuse. They don't know who to trust because they're being broken down by the people they should have trusted, and all those sort of appreciations and stuff. But just think about stress and what he was saying about the cognitive functions. It limits the brain function because of where the blood and the the energy is going and all that sort of stuff. So then a reaction to the fear state is retreat, like he said, protection versus growth. Okay, so you might retreat to just managing variables that you can only comprehend. So just appreciate the 3D 5 sense versus the multi-D, right? Most people are in a very reduced life force state from my perspective, so they can't handle the variables, so they just retreat to what they can control and master and all those sort of things. And so there's a limiting of perception, okay? But then just appreciate the love state. You know, if you're not governed by fear or reaction to things, you can discern all the variables and then process at a very large level, right? So I don't want to get too deep in this, but you probably get the gist of what I'm saying, all right? What's the best state for you to be in any moment? Like the peak awareness, you know, mastering the moment sort of thing. Ideally, you want to be able to process as many variables as you can at any instance, all right? And so just appreciate how love and fear state and stress, right, and your perception of the environment you're in may have a detrimental effect on your pattern recognition and intuitive potential, right, and perceptions of things and discernment, right, and the volume of life force that you can invest in your perception and your awareness and defense and all those sort of things, right. And then your vitality and your health in your body and all those sort of things, and what happens to your immune system and all that sort of stuff, and your ability to endure everything going on, right? All very interesting concepts, hey, and how simple they might actually be to be solutions that you have in any moment of your attitude to things. So I'm just going to move on and let Bruce take over again for maybe the remainder of it, okay? For the next section. So enjoy. Thank you for being here.
Now, you thought that was bad enough. You know, we shut down the viscera so we can run and so we're not getting growth. And we shut down the immune system because at that point it's not helping us with an external threat. Let me add the last kicker to it, and here's the kicker that's real important. Think about it. In a fight or flight situation, do you think you would use neurological reasoning and conscious, like this, that, or do you use reflex behavior? Which one? Reflex behavior. You know what? Reflex behavior is the hindbrain, and thinking and logic and reasoning are the forebrain. So here's what happens, and most of you have experienced it. It's called exam stress. And here's how it works. The moment the adrenaline levels and the glucocorticoid levels rise to get you into a fight or flight posture, remember I told you the blood vessels in the viscera are squeezed shut and forces the blood out to the periphery? The blood vessels in the forebrain get squeezed shut and only feed the blood to the hindbrain. When you're under stress, you lose intelligence. It's required because it's not a time to be thinking, it's a time to be responding. So the issue is, and if you've been in an exam stress, you know what that means. It's like you study like 3 days in a row. You got, man, I'm going to get an A. I sit down, open up the exam book, look at the first question. I don't know the first question. You know what happens? You could feel your body begin to change right there. Adrenaline's running all over. You start to sit in the seat. You're starting to shake. Your muscles are ready to run. Why? To protect your life now. And then you're trying to think of the answer. And guess what? You cannot think of the answer to that question. You probably cannot think of the answer to the next question or the next question until you do what? Until you calm back down again. The reason is this. It's a protection mechanism that thinking is not helpful under a stressful situation. It will interfere with the response. So the bottom line is this. 3 things happen under stress, each one of them debilitating you at 3 different levels. Level 1, your viscera shuts down. Your growth and maintenance mechanisms are reduced. Number 2, your immune system is shut down or inhibited to conserve energy, which then allows opportunistic organisms free run of the playground. Number 3, in response to the stress, you start operating from reflex behavior, and your intelligence in the response is now lost from the response. And all of a sudden you see the debilitating effects of stress. Now, it's not bad for an acute thing. I'm running, I fall down, I hurt myself. I can go through an acute little stress response. When does it have damage? I'll give you the simple analogy to make sense of it. Imagine a community. Let's go back to the 1950s. Remember those years when we were afraid the Russians were going to drop bombs on us, okay? So what did we do? We built bomb shelters. So the kids don't know about that, but we had bomb shelters. Now here's the issue. There's a community. Here we are in Memphis. Kids are going to school. Factories are working. People are doing jobs. The community is in a state of growth, right? Yes or no? Say yeah. Good following on that. Good. Okay. They're in a state of growth. Now here's the issue. The air raid siren goes off. Where do the people go? To the bomb shelter. What happened to the job? It stops. The community function stops. The cells or the people are not involved with the community. They're out to save their own individual lives. And the point is this. I go down in the bomb shelter and I wait, and 5 minutes later the all clear goes. Then what do? We go out of the bomb shelter, we go back to work, and it was just like that's called an acute response. It's just a momentary event. So there was a short, it's like a coffee break. We took an extra long coffee break, right? Here's where the problem comes. This is where the issue is. We're working on a job. The air raid siren goes off. We run into the bomb shelter, and we wait, and we wait, and we wait, and there's no all clear. What happens then? It's automatic. What happens? Stress, and what happens to your survival? How long can you live in the bomb shelter, or how much food did you store in there? And the bottom is this. What happens when you run out of food? Then what happens? You die. Here's the issue. Your cells are in a community. They work together in a coherent group just like the community of people. The moment the air raid siren goes off in the body saying our survival is under threat, then the cells get into the bomb shelter. The problem is most of our stresses are chronic. They're there all the time. And as long as we maintain a chronic stress, then the more stress we maintain, the more cells in my body stay in the bomb shelter and don't come back out. And the relevance is the cells will die, the tissues will undergo a disorganization, and disease will ensue. And the consequence? The stress. It wasn't the genes, it wasn't the system, it was the belief that went into it. So the bottom line...
Welcome back. Thanks for being here. Thanks for allowing me to be a part of a journey. So this next section was all about our ability to adapt, okay? And the adaptation sort of stuff is interesting because he gets to it on a cellular level where the cell's ability to adapt to a toxic environment, and it's an evolution sort of thing that goes on, which wasn't appreciated in the past. But, it's our ability to adapt to circumstance is fascinating, right? So its ability to basically transmute what we're in, okay, to endure it and then overcome and then pick ourselves up and move on, right? So there's a lot of stress and a lot of fight versus flight sort of reactions and scenarios that we might be in, but adaptation is a quality that we can be in control and determine our fate with. All right, so it's getting dark and I don't know how much more light I've got and stuff, so what I might do is just appreciate your ability to adapt to any circumstance and all the data and your processing and all that sort of stuff. I know some epic adapters out there to the circumstances they're in, and it's been a bit of a theme of late and stuff, right? So perhaps by me just offering this helps you appreciate the vitalness of our ability to adapt to any scenario and master ourselves in it, particularly like in circumstances that aren't our fault and stuff. You need to be able to react and defend yourself no matter what. And so testing yourself in all these different circumstances and putting yourself into areas that might be kryptonite sort of based and all that sort of stuff are very potent trainings to go through and all that sort of stuff to test your ability to adapt and all that sort of stuff. So putting yourself into uncomfortable scenarios is a valid sort of experience to do deliberately to train yourself and see your truth in any moment. Right? So I'm just going to leave you here and allow Bruce to continue. All right. So thanks for being here. I hope you get a lot from this.
So the bottom line is stress is the ultimate problem that we face if you got here with good genes. And I said 95 out of 100 got here with good genes. And stress does this. It alters the system. The stress signals come in at the cell membrane and activate the protein pathways, which are respiration, digestion, excretion, etc. But here's the issue. If a cell encounters stress, what can it do? I already mentioned a couple of things. Well, I'll tell you what it can do. Number one, it could wall itself off, go into the bomb shelter. And the question is, yeah, I can survive, but not for a long time doing that. So that's a temporary effect. It's the only thing I can do temporarily. Another thing cells can do is that they can secrete things in their environment to try to make their environment happier. But that's a very expensive process because if I can't change the whole environment, I'm always just wasting energy throwing it out. It's like trying to heat Memphis in the wintertime by opening your window and leaving your heater on, figuring maybe all of Memphis is going to get warm. And the bottom line is, no, that doesn't work either. So the third thing that is possible, now this is real exciting stuff. The third thing that is possible is you can adapt. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means change your genes or change your biology to respond to the stress. Well, what is adaptation in biology today? There is no adaptation in biology. Why? Because we undergo a belief system called Darwinian evolution that says what? That the changes in the genes, the first premise is all gene changes are random. What does that mean? How can I adapt if my genes change randomly? I don't know. Maybe sometimes they'll adapt. Maybe they won't. And the problem is this. Conventional biology has held for years and years and years the belief that when genes change, they only change by accident and randomly so that you can't ever control the outcome of a mutation. And so the consequence of that is conventional belief then talks about, well, you know those 95 out of 100 people, that, let's say in cancer, in breast cancer, for example, again, 5% of women have a hereditary linkage, 95% of women don't. Yet 95% of these other women who express the cancer alter the genes. So then what do? We go up to the chart and we say, well, the only way you can alter the genes is randomly, so it must have been just a random event. Cancer is random. Well, that's the belief system until we get rid of the assumption that Darwinian evolution is not the way that evolution really occurred, that there is another way. Well, what is that other way? It was first presented in 1988 in this paper that was published in the journal Nature. The Nature is a mainstream journal, and the article is called The Origin of Mutants by John Cairns, a British geneticist. And here's what he found. Listen to this, because this is one of the most important papers in the history of biological science. Why? Here's what he did. He took bacteria that had a defective enzyme. The enzyme is called lactase. Lactase is an enzyme who breaks down the milk sugar called lactose. And that enzyme is necessary to break down the sugar to extract the energy and the building blocks so the bacteria can use the lactose as a food source to power its growth and division. So these bacteria that Cairns starts with have defective enzymes for lactase. They cannot eat lactose. That's the truth. So he takes these bacteria and he puts them in a petri dish, and the only food he put in the petri dish is lactose. Talk about stress. These little bacteria guys were going, oh man, there's nothing to eat in here. Well, the problem is this. When there's nothing to eat, they can't divide. And when they can't divide, they can't reproduce the DNA, which is generally where the source of the mutations occur. And the result is they can't divide, they can't change the DNA, we expect nothing to happen. And yet, in all the petri dishes, after a few days, there are bacterial colonies growing in every one of them. And the question was that Cairns said, how the heck did that happen? Conventional understanding says that these can't divide because there wasn't any energy, so they can't change the DNA. How did they change the DNA? So when he examined the DNA, what he found was they didn't randomly change a whole bunch of genes. They focused on the genes for lactose, the lactase enzyme, and they changed just the lactase gene, even though they weren't dividing. It was a whole new mechanism, a whole new concept. And the interesting part about it is, when he reported this, the British journal Nature, they wrote an editorial right after his paper. The editors wrote, they said, look, John Cairns is a distinguished molecular geneticist. We know his work for years, but this paper, we have trouble with. In fact, the title of the editorial that the British journal had was A Unicorn in the Garden. The point is a little British humor, it's like a fantasy in the Garden of Eden here, The Americans, No sense of humor, because a week later an editorial came out in the journal Science, which is the mainstream journal of American science, and look at the title, A Heresy in Evolutionary Biology. What's a heresy? Well, that's for religious people. And it said this, there's a religious belief, and the religious belief, and I say religious, is that it's underlined in there that mutation is a continuous and random process. I'll read it for you because you may not be able to read it. The line underneath at the bottom, it says, Cairns demonstrated that bacteria can choose which mutations they should produce. Then the editors write, anything more heretical can hardly be imagined. Why are they so upset? And the answer is this. Think how profound it is. If mutations can occur as a result of adapting, then mutations are not necessarily random. And if mutations are not random, then evolution wasn't an accident. We didn't get here by accident. We got here by program. The relevance of this is that we actually got here through a process of creation and evolution simultaneously occurring, that the organisms were pre-adapting to the environment, and the signals in the environment were shaping the organism, so that evolution was not an accident. Well, of course, conventional religious, we went from religion, people wearing black coats, the new religion, they wear white lab coats, but it's just as much a religion as anything else. And the bottom line about that belief is that when we question the belief, everybody, what do you mean energy healing? That's heresy. What do you mean changing the genes? That's heresy. The truth is, no, it's called science. But science has a conviction to hold the truth, especially as the pharmaceutical industry, again, is trying to impress upon us because they're selling us a lot of things. So the bottom line is this. What does this say? Well, this paper, let me explain. The paper Cairns' paper came out in 1988. That was over 12 years ago, okay? This paper in Scientific American is in 1997, so that was 9 years after. Point about this paper. I have to read it for you because you won't be able to read it. I'm going to use my theatrical. I'm on a stage, so I'm going to read it theatrically. It says, evolution evolving. Here's my theatrical part. New findings suggest mutation is more complicated than anyone thought. First line, 9 years ago, John Cairns. And the point was, new findings 9 years ago? Where have these guys been? And the answer is this. For 9 years, they consistently tried to undermine Cairns' findings. For 9 years, they did that. When this paper was published in Scientific American, they're not saying that Cairns was right. What they're saying is this. They can't seem to find another explanation, but they're still looking for it. Because the idea is, it appears to be right, but it can't be right. But now it's a few more years down the road, and now we have another understanding. So now I'm going to show you this, and this is out of Science, the journal Science. So it's not a chart that I'm making up. This is a chart out of the journal Science. This is the flow chart of information before Cairns. This is the Darwinian flow chart. How does it work? It says organisms at the top mature and they mate. They create variants. So let's say two dogs. Two dogs at the top mate. They make a litter of puppies. The puppies are all variants of the parents. Now what happens is, we also know there's a runt at one end of the litter and there's the bulldog one at the other end of the litter, so there's a range. When the puppies have to leave the litter and they have to go out and fend for their own lives, what's going to happen to the runt? Is it going to make it? No, it's not going to be able to survive. It won't be able to compete. So what happens is nature selects the strongest one to survive and gets rid of the weakest one. That's what selection is all about, natural selection. So it says this, that those that are capable of surviving mature start to cycle over again, that all the variations arise in the part of the reproduction phase, which is the belief is when the DNA gets altered. Now, I'm going to show you the new flow chart based on Cairns, and it becomes very relevant for this reason. Let me first explain it before I show it to you. You see the box variants? I'm going to show you in the new chart, it's on the right-hand side, but there are 3 variant boxes. So it goes organisms, variant, selection, and I want to talk about those first. So let's take a look at the chart. The chart is this, organism, and there are 3 variants, genes of DNA metabolism, genotype variation, phenotype variation, selection. Let me explain what they represent. Phenotype variation. Phenotype is the physical expression as you see it. So your phenotype is how you look physically in the world. Genotype is the underlying genetic code that programs for this structure. The box on the top, there's a new name for it. So let me give you the new name because it makes much more sense. The box on the top is not called genes of DNA metabolism anymore. There's a new name. It's called genetic engineering genes. What did they find? That in every nucleus, in every cell in your body, you have genes whose function it is to rewrite the other genes if they encounter stress. So the significance is then you're capable of rewriting your genes. But here's the most important part. What was not even included in the other chart but is now included, and it wasn't there before? And the answer is these two boxes right here, the environment and organisms' perception of the environment. Look where the arrows go. What can the environment do? Follow the arrow. It goes up, across, number 6 and number 5. What does it say it can do? The environment can cause the genetic engineering genes to rewrite your genes. Number 2, they can change your genetic code. That's what it does. Now here's the important one. Organisms' perception of the environment. What can it do? It can rewrite your genes, number 4, or it can change your physiological body to respond to the environment. What's the relevance of all this? Well, the environment was never even included in conventional biology. Now the environment is found to be very important, and more so, remember the slide I showed you about perceptions and belief? Overlay the top. And look, organism, environment, that's the slide we showed, is the environment. Organism's perception. We said perception is belief. And what does it affect? The cells. In what way? By rewriting the genes and changing the structure of the cells. The bottom line is this. Your belief in a stressful situation will rewrite your genes to accommodate the stress. And the relevance about that is that if the stressful environment is something that's not even real out there, you will change your biology to fit what you believe. And the issue is this, then specific organs and specific tissues of the body are connected to the beliefs. There's a great book by Louise Hay called You Can Heal Your Life. There's a glossary in the back, and she's done great research to reveal that specific stresses affect different portions of your body. And as a result, if you understand which portion of your body is affecting the stress, then you can deal with it by understanding what emotions are eliciting that stress. And I'll give you, it's just very critical to understand this, is that the symptoms of your body are your body telling you that you're under stress. That's clear. But the point about it is your body is trying to tell you with a symptom, deal with the stress. Because if you're not dealing with it, we're going to have a problem in here. And here's the interesting point. When we go to conventional medical care, what do they do with the symptom? They cover it up. So you don't feel anything anymore. You know what the analogy is like? Because this is true. When I was working in graduate school, I was working in a Chevy dealership to make some money. And Friday afternoon, all the guys had cleaned up their tools. The shop is ready. Everybody's closing up. It's almost 5 o'clock. Everybody wants to go home. And this woman came in, and she'd been in a couple of times before. This is her 3rd trip. For what's the issue? She came in because the little light on her dashboard says service engine now keeps going on. And she got very upset by this, and she's like, I brought in 3 times. She started to go through all this stuff. So one mechanic, brave guy, says, I can fix it. So he takes the car to the back to the bay. He gets inside the car. He goes under the dashboard. He pulls out the little light bulb. And then he has a smoke and hangs out. Why? Because obviously it takes a long time to do this work so you can charge him, And the bottom line is, after about 20, 30 minutes, he brings the car back out front and says, it's fixed. And the woman got in the car, and guess what? She was happier than anything could be. She drove away. The damn light didn't come on again. The problem is this. When we go to rid ourselves of symptoms, we are pulling the light out. The symptom is just the information that something is going wrong. That if you cut off that information about the symptom, you're telling the body, I'm not listening to you. And what's the body going to do? It's going to find another way to bring you some more information, but the next time it's going to be worse news than it was the first time. And the issue is this. Symptoms are telling you that you're not running in a coordinated fashion with your body, and that becomes important. So,
Hey, welcome back. I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm not sure if this is the last section. We'll see how we go, all right? This variable is related to the environment inputs, all right? And the environment inputs are the circumstance we're in and the data that we gained and our reaction to them, right? So there can be all sorts of environment variables, such as influences, danger, uncertainty, all those sort of things, right? But then what they might do is the interpretation of them might affect our body. And then say we go into the stress state or the love state or the fear state and all that sort of stuff, right? That have all the biological reactions to our body if we're not in mastery of it and a passenger to those things, or we're depleted and all that sort of stuff and relative to the life force level. So we know the world that we're in and all that sort of stuff, and I was talking about Michael Desarian sort of clips relative to fear and all that sort of stuff. But one of the cool clips he has is all about enlightenment and not being affected by anything anyone else says, does, or thinks, sort of thing. Right? That's a interesting metaphor of enlightenment, and I might include that clip now. All right, just at the end, rather than the fear clip at the start. Depending if I'm doing two parts and all that sort of stuff, I might have included this at the start of this if this was the second part as well. Right? So that's a reference of why I offered that. But then if we appreciate that there can be influences, and that's why it's so important of me sort of sharing all the content that I've offered about the level of influences out there and stuff. They are a valid variable, right? But in spite of that, we can always control how we react to anything. The key is like my investment in all these content that I've done and stuff is to impart a very rich and dense appreciation of all the variables that we may have to endure and face in our world, but there's still a way to navigate it. And ideally, like I said at the start, it's like none of all this stuff going on would happen if we're inferior. So if we're superior, that's why it's going on, all right? So how do we engage that, okay? So if we appreciate that as a foundation and we have it as like, okay, there's a potential I am superior here, but how do I engage that and navigate and then thrive in this amazing planet is the battleground in the occupied state and sort of stuff, right? So appreciating the environment we're in and then putting yourself into harmful situations, or if you've got lack, like you put yourself into shit or you go into crap jobs and all this sort of stuff and you don't think you have any self-worth, so you don't allow yourself to earn good money and all those sort of things. But then there's a complacency kicks in, and people, like I said, inaction. When people are in abundance, they tend not to act. Like one of the beautiful things that I learnt when I was in poverty is that there's not much difference between those in huge abundance and not having much. The little things matter, right? But the key from the survival thing that has the edge is that it's pure 100% motivation, right? Whereas if you're in abundance, you can not act anytime because you can order like delivery, sort of Uber Eats or whatever and stuff, and get food delivered to you. Whereas say if I had to walk 5 or 10 kilometers to get food, then I've got absolute motivation and stuff, right? So just appreciate that between abundance and survival and lack of abundance. The motivation is there and stuff. So the environment is triggering you to have motivation and stuff. So but then there's like the information and all that sort of stuff that we choose to contemplate and all that sort of stuff. And then you get into this world with the algorithms that are triggered, that are designed for people and their specifics and all that tailored for them to get the reaction and all that sort of stuff. So you have to appreciate all these and observe it and stuff, and then observe you and your body reaction to it, right? And then I didn't offer it at the start, but our heart tech, right? There's a lot of concepts out there that tell you to open your heart, like allow shit into your heart and all this sort of stuff, right? So if love is related to the heart tech and all that, and the nourishment and that, why would you allow your heart open to all the crap out there, okay? So just think about that. Like I talked about in Amplify the Echoes Part 15, there's so many concepts out there that are designed to set us up for failure. They're not accidents. It's not a joke, all right? So in my sovereignty declaration, I've got about encrypting your heart at 1000D. If it's so sacred and precious to you, why would you allow crap into it? Okay? Don't do it. Just don't. Okay? Don't. Protect your heart. It's so sacred and precious to you. Okay? So it's getting dark, and I don't know how long this is, and if this is in part 2, part 11, we'll have to see with all the clips and stuff like that I want to offer. Okay? Because I think fear versus love state is such a massive, massive, vital concept to master. And Bruce Lipton doing it this way, like offering Bruce this way, is to me going to be very, very potent to help you appreciate the body mechanics and you as a conscious in your amazing body tech, right? To help not only endure but navigate and thrive in this amazing world despite everything going on and all the variables and options in it, right? And maybe have an amazing life from here that maybe you didn't allow yourself to think you're worthy of, or not, because you've got perceptions about things out there when most things out there are just life force. And what do you value yourself, and what do you invest in, and the emotions that you allow yourself to experience, all right? So I've made it just before dark, but it's going to get dark very quick. So if you made it to now, whether this is part 10 or part 11, I just want to really thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey. And as always, I hope if I've offered stuff here, it's been very rich and potent for you. I hope it's helped you reassess and see life in a totally different view that maybe you didn't realize you had a potential that was right there before you. And so you start really appreciating, and maybe go back to all the others I've offered in this epic series that is so core and foundational to our ability not only to endure but thrive, alright? So I hope this is a very potent teaching for you, and I hope you get a lot from it. And see how you go. Try it out. Don't give your emotional power away to other things and variables trying to impress on you and use emotional leverage to manipulate you and all this sort of stuff, right? You have the ability to not be affected by anything. Just see the motivation behind all these things and the manipulations and all sorts of stuff going on in our world and people around us, all right? And don't let their tantrums and all that affect you, okay? But I really hope you get a lot from this. I hope you're very empowered. I hope you feel the vitality and the potency in your amazing body tech, and you have an awesome partnership with it from this moment on, all right? And have an epic life, all right? So thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey. I hope you get a lot from this. And until next time, Andre out.
The sun is gonna keep on shining brighter days on the horizon. My love for you will always keep on rising. Everything's gonna be alright tonight. Oh yeah, my love for you is gonna keep on rising. The sun's gonna keep on shining, bright days on the horizon. My love for you will keep on rising. Everything's gonna be alright. The sun remember heading for the city lights. 975, sharing each other, nearer than farther. Scent of lemon drips from your eyes. We are the people that rule the world, what's running in every boy and girl, all rejoicing in the world. Take me now. We can drive a little adventure, love in the summer, follow the sun tonight, reminiscing of the times of life. For each every other, the feeling is stronger. Shock at 11, got lost in your eyes. Can't do why when I think you're gonna leave me, but I'm gonna try. Are you gonna leave me now? Can't you be believing now? Can't do why when I think you're gonna leave me, but I'm gonna try. Are you gonna leave me now? Can't you be believing now? Can you remember in human nights? It was to where we'd energize, lie in the sand and visualize like it's 75 again. We are the people that rule the world, what's running in every boy and girl, all rejoicing in the world. Take me now. We can drive. Can't do why when I think you're gonna leave me, but I'm gonna try. Are you gonna leave me now? Can't you be believing now? Can't do why when I think you're gonna leave me, but I'm gonna try. Are you gonna leave me now? Can't you be believing now? Know everything about you, know everything about me, know everything about us. I know everything about you, know everything about me, know everything about us. Can't do why when I think you're gonna leave me, but I'm gonna try. Are you gonna leave me now? Can't you be believing now? Can't do why when I think you're gonna leave me, but I'm gonna try. Are you gonna leave me now? Can't you be believing now?
John Lilly once put it this way: there are no limits at all to the human mind whatsoever, except those we impose on ourselves because of our beliefs. And those limits are also beliefs to be transcended. And that's a view that suggests that the possibilities of human transformation are virtually infinite. And we have no way of knowing the outer horizon of what it means to be human.
And really, to understand all this, everything, you have to go very, very deep into a study of history, consciousness, neurophysiology, everything. You have to be the supreme eclectic type of leaning, and you really have to be wanting to know who you are and what everything's about.
And the thing that you'll find when you go to sacred sites, if you're very humble about it, is that you are on a personal journey, and the sacred site will respond to you in a way that is appropriate only to you. The information is always what you are searching for. And it's the intent you give that energy that defines whether it is used for right action or not. And it is inside these sacred spaces that you will be reminded that you are a god, that you are a bright star.
So what you're trying to do is move through the course without ricocheting off walls or creating karma. You're trying to slide through things smoothly. How do you do that? It's called flowing. There's a technique that you can do that will allow you to touch some part of your inner being that has more knowledge than your conscious state does.